Hello, I want to tell you something pretty exciting. There's a research method that I have been a big proponent of, big fan of this research method, and I've been telling everybody this is the greatest thing. You've got to do this. You don't need to learn statistics. If you're writing articles, you're writing papers, use this research method. We really will figure out how astrology works. So, I've been on this campaign. This is the greatest thing. And what I recently found out, and I think it's really exciting, is that this research method that I've been so excited about and saying is so wonderful is being used more than I realized in many areas. In particular, it's used a lot in genetics research. And I did not know this. I've been, on a bandwagon saying this is so cool and not realizing that in other fields, people feel the same way. They're saying, you've got to do this. This is great. And it's something that wasn't done before for many reasons. It requires databases and computers to do stuff. And 50 years ago, that wasn't easily available, especially readily available databases. For various reasons, as experts develop these ideas and keep working on it and the technology gets better, this new door has opened. And so I'm excited that not only is it a big deal for astrology, it's a big deal for areas like genetics. And what's also interesting in the case of genetics is, in a way, genetics is kind of similar to astrology in that in genetics you have a code, you have the little genes, packed up in your cells, and that hidden code is going to describe your appearance, your behavior, even your mental and emotional condition to some extent. And astrology is the same way. We have a code. It's way out in the stars, and it's going to describe your traits. So it's like two different codes. And interestingly, in both fields, one which of course is very accepted and very scientific and very factual, genetics, is recently gotten excited about this research method, and some people, such as myself, getting excited about the same research method in astrology. So it's very cool. It helps confirm to me that we're on the right track, because these experts in genetics research, this is what they do, and their level of expertise is going to be greater than my expertise because I'm doing a lot of things. But these people who are, professors of research methods doing genetics research, coming to the same conclusion. Also, what's cool is I was able to get in touch with some of these experts to confirm that my understanding of what they're doing is correct, and they confirmed that I understand it properly and had some correspondence. And I did not tell them straight away that I'm an astrologer. I said I have a master's degree in research methods, and I'm training people in my field. I just said my field, who are not very familiar with anything about research methods. And I think extreme case sampling is wonderful, and I'm excited to see you're doing this in genetics research and so on. And I was able to get some feedback and support and confirm that, yes, we're on the right track with this extreme case sampling. If you've watched my videos on the greatest athletes, a series, I think a dozen videos on the greatest athletes, the most influential rock and roll musicians, a dozen videos on that, and also the studies on what does Aries mean, what does Taurus mean, all this extreme case sampling emphasis, and I'm saying, look, you can figure out this is really convincing what Aries really means, what Taurus really means, and they're confirming it in the genetics research. So I just thought that was really cool. So in genetics, I'm going to just go over this quickly. I just wanted to tell you this cool, exciting development. Very cool because it's confirming that we're on the right path with this kind of research, and also fascinating how the same kind of idea develops simultaneously in different areas. So I'm going to just go over this quickly. I've got some screens here. You can pause. That's what I'm looking for. You can pause the video and read some of these screens. I'm not going to go over them in detail. I'm going to show you some websites if you want to go into more detail. But I just want to summarize some key points. Number one, in genetics, they call it extreme phenotype sampling. Phenotype means your physical characteristic. Like they studied obesity. So if somebody is obese, that's the physical characteristic. And of course, the genotype is the gene. So you have the hidden code, hidden to those of us who are not geneticists, the genes, and then you have the phenotype. And the astrology is exactly the same. We have our genotype, our genes, which by analogy is the astrology, and then we have the phenotype, which is the behavior, the personality, and so on. So extremely similar idea. And so two big points I'm making. Number one, that extreme case sampling is an established and effective research method, more established and more effective than I realized. I was aware it's used, a little bit in various kinds of social science research. I did not know how important and growing importance it has, a new important development in genetics research. And also, this is great, from studying what's going on with extreme phenotype sampling, which again just means extreme case sampling of the phenotype. Extreme case sampling of the phenotype is exactly equivalent to extreme case sampling of the greatest athletes, of the greatest rock musicians, and so on. In astrology, we also do the equivalent of what would be extreme genotype sampling, which is the people with the most Aries. So in astrology, we can do it both ways. But anyway, getting to my point number two is that from reading this information on extreme phenotype sampling and getting some correspondence with experts, I found out an improvement that we can make to the way we do extreme case sampling. We can learn something from extreme phenotype sampling to improve what we're doing. I got confirmation that what we have been doing is great. It's wonderful. Things always improve, and there's something we can do to make it even better. So I'm just going to review this, as I said, very, very quickly. In 2007, scientists found a gene that affects obesity. It's partly responsible for becoming obese. So obesity is partly behavioral, partly genetic. And the genetic marker for it was clearly discovered in 2007. And what some researchers wanted to find out is what kind of behaviors combine with the genetic marker to make you obese. Because not everybody with that genetic marker, obviously, they're not all going to become equally obese. So what other factors lead to obesity? And they found things like this, which is fascinating. That if you smoke cigarettes and you have the genetic marker, the smoking cigarettes does not appear to increase your likelihood of becoming obese. There's no indication yet, no indications, no data suggesting that smoking will increase the likelihood of obesity if you have the genetic marker. But if you drink artificially sweetened beverages and you have that genetic marker, you're very likely to become obese. So this is called an interaction of variables. So it's very, very important findings that they found. And how did they find this out? The old-fashioned idea was that you would have to get a random sample of the population and then do a double-blind experiment. They did not do any of that. They just did extreme case sampling. And it's a fast, efficient way to determine these kind of things. So here's some quotes in the middle of this slide and some additional information. I'll show, and there's also the website address. I'll show you some of these websites. Here's an article. Let me show you this one first. I have the website address on one of the slides for each of these website pages. Here's an article about the discovery of the gene in 2007, and I have two academic papers here. Here's one of them called Powerful Extreme Phenotype Sampling Designs and Score Tests for Genetic Association Studies. As often happens with academic papers, it's stated in clear technical terms, but basically this is on extreme phenotype sampling and how it finds associations. And here's another academic paper, Improving Power of Genetic Association Studies by Extreme Phenotype Sampling, a review and some new results. So, these papers are really out there. They're really making discoveries. I'm just giving you some idea of what's going on with this exciting new development in genetics, exactly parallel to what's happening in astrology. So, very exciting to see that we're on the same page, you might say, with genetics research in terms of using these cutting-edge tools to make discoveries. Okay, well, here's another quote about what was discovered in the study. I've mentioned this, and I'm just giving some quotes and some specific website pages in case you want to pursue this more, but I'll just go on. And here's a formal statement. I won't read this, but you can pause this and read it if you want, on exactly what extreme phenotype sampling is. I got some help from some experts in this research to help edit and clarify my terminology. But basically, if you pause this and read this whole statement, what it's saying is if you want to know what gene is responsible for some phenotype, I give it an extremely trivial, simplistic example of what's the gene for people to be tall. If you have a database of the height of people, just take the tallest people and then analyze whatever do the genetic analysis. Or if you think some behaviors might influence it, whatever you want to look at, just look at it only for that top 1%. And here's another amazingly similar thing about the genetics research and the astrology research, is that to do the genetic analysis for every single person in the database is too time-consuming and too expensive. Similarly, to have an astrologer do a chart analysis of every single person in a database is too time-consuming. It's just not realistic. So you can just take the top 1%, the top few, see what's going on. Now here's the thing. I mentioned that we learned something to improve the way we do extreme case sampling research in astrology. Here's the thing that we learned. In extreme phenotype sampling, they compare the top 1% or 5%, whatever cutoff they use, to the bottom 1%. So when we do the research on the extreme Aries or the extreme Taurus, which, by the way, is not a phenotype, that's the genotype, so to speak, which we can also do in astrology. You can do either way, either the extreme expression, the greatest athlete, the most influential rock musicians, or the most extreme astrology, the person with the most Aries Taurus. You can do either way works. I talked to the experts about this. I didn't tell them the details that it was astrology. I just told them the basic idea, and they said, yes, both ways, important. So what we'll do in the future, if we're looking at, say, extreme Aries, we'll compare the most extreme Aries with the bottom, the ones who have no Aries, and that will help confirm the results. There are also cases where if you have values for everybody, you can apply it to everyone, but it depends on the context. Anyway, at a minimum, you want to compare the top and the bottom if you can. A little improvement to the methods that to what we were doing with the astrology research. And that's what science and research is all about. It gets better and better and better. Okay, anyway, that's a formal statement about what it is that you could have pause that and read that if you want to. So here's a point about comparing extreme phenotype sampling with extreme case sampling in astrology. Number one, some similarities. In both cases, we have a database, and we look at the extreme cases, and we have a way to determine what the extreme cases are. A way in which extreme phenotype sampling is different from most of the astrology research is that the extreme phenotype sampling is a quantitative research on what we call a continuous variable. You like to have a what's called a body mass index. It's a score for how obese a person is. Each person has a score. That's different from what we're doing in most of the astrology research, where we don't have a score, we don't have a quantitative value. We're just looking at the extreme people and qualitatively thinking about what is it they have in common, and it's much more exploratory. So in some of my communication with experts in the field, they were really happy that we're putting an emphasis on exploratory. I don't know, happy, say encouraging. Very encouraging to, yes, do exploratory research this way. It's very, very helpful. Okay, so that's the improvement that I just mentioned. I've got some other information on this slide, by the way, about an introversion-extroversion study. I think let me just mention about that this is maybe slightly technical. I'll just mention this briefly. But the way we do extreme case sampling in astrology is either we do a Google search and we find out who the best athletes are or who the most influential musicians are, and we analyze that. That's similar to the extreme phenotype sampling that's done in genetics research. Or, instead of the behavior, we take the most extreme astrology, the people with the most Aries and Taurus. And when we're doing that, what we do is if we can, for the extreme astrology, I'm in the Series 3.0 software, we do the astrosignature research. We go into this astrosignature research, we create an astrosignature. So, for example, we have astrosignatures here for all kinds of things. Here's our new research on bipolar, which is going to be presented at the Vibrational Astrology Conference in 2020. We create these astrosignatures. Or when we're doing the research on extreme Aries, we go in here, we can just say Aries. I just create an astrosignature, and then I come in here and I say Sun in Aries, give it 5 points. I insert a new item, and I say Moon, give it 5 points. Insert a new item, Mercury, I'll give it 3 points. So you can just weight things, give it a score or a weight, and have whoever gets the most points for Aries is the extreme Aries. The way you weight it ends up not making that much difference, because if you have all of your inner planets and ascendant in Aries, no matter how you weight it, you're going to come out near the top as strong Aries. Anyway, this is how we do the extreme case, one of the ways we do it. It's called a regression model, and then there are additional things you can do with that. Let me just leave it at that. I just want to give you an idea here that we have ways to select out the charts, either by the behavior through a search, or if it's based on the astrology, we can go through and pull out the extreme types. But not all of the astrological research I do is extreme case sampling. There's a lot of other things we do. I just made a video on data visualization, which was one of the keys for the bipolar research. So extreme case sampling is not always, it's not like one way is the only way. It's one of several fantastic new research tools that's emerging and becoming strong, not only in astrology but other fields. Anyway, just want to give you an idea that there are concrete things that you do. And you go in and you select things. And I've made, as you know, I've made over 340 videos at the time I'm making this one. Lots of them on the research and so on. So there's a huge amount of information that I've made available to pursue all this in more detail. Okay, I'm almost done with this presentation. Just trying to give you an idea of what's going on with this extreme case sampling in the area of genetics and how it encourages us and supports and suggests that what we're doing is definitely working and a good way to do the research. Here's I got couple little addendums to the main presentation here. Here's a fun thing. Imagine at some future time someone researching in genetics, such as the obesity. They have two main things right now. They have a gene or genes, and they have some behaviors to predict whether you'll become obese. We could dream that at some point genetics researchers would consider astrology, and the astrology would be a third kind of predictor. Excuse me. So you have the genetic predictors, the behavioral predictors, such as whether you drink these beverages that are artificially sweetened. Third thing would be the astrology. Maybe Venus-Jupiter aspects incline to obesity, or maybe, Taurus or something. And if the astrology works, when you combine it with the genetics and the behavior, you would get it fantastically more, you would get a better, I shouldn't say fantastic, you would get a better result. So they would enhance each other, because these are what we call uncorrelated variables. The astrology probably does not correlate much with the genetics, and the behavior doesn't correlate that much with either one. So they would all support each other, and you get a better result. So that, just giving you ideas about how exciting it is that we are using research methods that are also being used at the cutting edge of many other kinds of research, including genetics research, and just a little dream. We can dream about how things could be done at some future time in research. Okay. Well, this I don't need to go over that much, unless you read all the previous slides, and if you go to the articles on those websites and you read about it. One of the points about extreme case sampling, as used in the genetics research, the extreme phenotype sampling, is they emphasize that it improves the power of the research. And power in this case has a specific meaning. It's not a generic term as we use in normal English. Power is the ability to find a relationship if it exists, and more technically, it's 1 minus the probability of a type 2 error. Don't worry about that. But anyway, the reason it's worth sharing this is that extreme case sampling is not used only because it's much faster and easier than getting a random sample, because usually with extreme case sampling, for example, the extreme phenotype sampling, usually it's not with randomly selected data. It's usually hospital records, which is very selective. It's people who happen to show up at a hospital. Only certain kinds of people go to the hospital. It's not a good random selection of any population, but it still tells us how these variables work and which ones are important. And by pointing us to exactly what's important, we can then apply that to any other research, and we can do random samples or anything we want, but it reveals what to find, which otherwise is like finding a needle in a haystack. So anyway, there's a lot of excitement about extreme case sampling in hard science areas, doing quantitative research. I didn't know this. So to me it's exciting. I thought extreme case sampling was only used occasionally in social science research in a more qualitative way. Okay, so here's the conclusions. This is my last slide. Just to summarize, number one, extreme case sampling is used with success, with great success in genetics research. It is a very important research tool, and even more important than I realized in areas like genetics when I started my campaign about extreme case sampling. So that's good. That's supporting that we're on the right track and doing the right thing with this. Number two, extreme case sampling is very appropriate for astrological research for many reasons that I talk about in some of the other videos, but it's very appropriate. Number three, input from experts in the field encourages the use of extreme case sampling for exploratory research. So in my communications with different experts in using things like extreme phenotype sampling, this is one of the best uses of it is when you don't know exactly what's involved. We don't know exactly what's in the charts of the greatest rock musicians, or there's some debate about what Aries does or does it, how does it work consistently. It's fantastic for that. Number four, as I mentioned, I'm just summarizing, in future extreme case sampling studies in our astrological research, we will, when feasible, we will compare the top with the bottom. So we'll do exactly what we did to confirm that the people with the most Aries have a certain thing, but we should also be able to make a good argument that people with no Aries don't have it. Because if they also have what we said Aries has, this honesty, this integrity, if we cannot make a good argument that the ones at the bottom do not particularly have it, that that's not the conspicuous thing for more of the ones at the low end, then that weakens our argument. So they should be distinguished. The top from the bottom should distinguish each other. So we've got a nice improvement for future research. The research we did was great. It's wonderful. But the nature of research methods and science is you get better and better and better as you go forward. Last point, that, well, this point isn't that important, but depending on your study, this is the difference with most of the genetics research is they have values, what we call continuous values, on everyone, and in that case, you can do what we call a regression analysis or some variation of a regression analysis. It's what's called a regression model. Anyway, my point really with this last point, number 5, is that depending on the details of the specific research you're doing, there are additional things you can do after you compare the extremes, the top and the bottom, with each other. There may be additional things you can analyze, or maybe not. Depends on the context. But we don't need to go into that. I just want to let you know that there's variations. And also keep in mind, extreme case sampling is not the panacea for all ills. The last video I made on research designs, just before this one, was on the importance of data visualization and how in the 2020 Vibrational Astrology Conference, so if you go to astrosoftware.com and you go to the conference here, conference information, every year we have a Vibrational Astrology Conference. In 2020, it's March 27 to 29. The lectures by Giselle Cherry on bipolar disorder was not extreme case sampling. We did data visualization. No, first we analyzed what was in her client data. Then we did a lot of data visualization, and then we developed the astrosignatures. So there's a lot of different tools. Extreme case sampling is just one of them. But many fast, efficient ways to find out how astrology really works. And it's synergistic with everything we do now with our clients and famous people and everything. All right, my friends. Well, I just want to share with you. I ended up taking, a half hour, longer than I thought, just to tell you that what's going on, that extreme case sampling is a much bigger deal, more established, more excitement, being developed more and more in some different areas, and genetics is one of them, and it's helping us. It's better understand what to do and encouraging us and supporting that we're on the right track with the things that we're doing. So thank you very much for listening, my friends. God bless. Namaste.